Nick Tyrone, neoliberal centrist dad. I'm quite nervous about this one, mainly because what I want to talk about in this video is difficult to talk about in an extraordinarily weird way. Because, in a sense, it's very easy. I could sit here and talk about this topic for hours and hours and hours. Because it's something I think about every single day, at least for part of the day. It's always there. In a way, it's the reality I currently live in. It's that kind of real to me. Yet I mostly feel alone in it, and it's a strange thing where I sort of feel like most of what I'm going to talk about is obvious in some senses, and maybe obvious to the point of going, does this need to be said? And yet then I look around and I think, well, yeah, it needs to be said, because we are living in a place where where everything is so odd and everything's so weird, and the reality that we're living in, the collective reality that we are all living in the Western world, is so bizarre and off kilter that I sort of feel like I need to point out what to me are really obvious things but don't seem to be obvious to a lot of people. So that's what this really is. I've titled this something. I will title this something along the line of curated non-reality. That's the phrase that I came up with to describe what I'm trying to get to. This idea that we're all living increasingly in these sort of bubbles that are made for us, and that we slip into, and we find a bubble that we're comfortable with, and then most people stay in the bubble and feel very comfy in the bubble, and that's where they're happy. The interesting thing being is if you travel to places that are poor, particularly, this is something I've experienced in Britain, where people are just less online. There are loads of people who are still online in these places. I'm just saying less so. There are fewer people who are online than you would find in London or Manchester or Birmingham. And their take on reality is so different, and it's so interesting, and it's kind of almost like a callback, like they're living in 2006 still, and it's quite comforting to speak to people who are still living in 2006, because part of me still wishes I lived in 2006. I mean, not just because I would have been, I was younger in 2006, but there were comforting things about that time, the 2000s, that we don't have anymore. Because I think we had the excitement of the internet growing and becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger part of our lives as that decade went on. And yet we still we still touched grass, basically. We still felt in touch with one another's realities. And I guess my biggest fear about this video, and one of the reasons I'm nervous about making it, is that even though I think everything I'm about to say is very obvious, I worry that it falls on deaf ears. For the very reason, almost proving what I'm talking about in terms of a curated non-reality that all of us are living in. What I see every day, this is my experience of media, of social media in particular, but media of all forms, and that can be mainstream media, and that can be new media, YouTube, etc. Is I essentially see totally insane shit all the time from the right, totally insane shit from the left. And what I also see is people on the right very happy to call out the insane crap on the left, and while turning a total blind eye to the insanity on their own side, and vice versa. So it's the same, going the other way. Every few days, some videos I've seen recently on YouTube where I saw one recently. It was a really good takedown of the sort of Rogan, Austin comedy sphere, and that whole end of the right in America. And it was really kind of interesting and spot on for most of it. And then it kind of got into this. You could see the political leaning of the person making it. And it was basically like, oh, well, the left is wonderful and the left doesn't have any problems and the left is just great. It's just being put upon by these edgelords who have created this reality, and they're warping our minds instead of, and that was the bit where I was like, hold on, wait a second. There's plenty of insane crap on the left. I'm really sorry, but there is. And so I'll see every few days a great takedown of the insanity on the right by a left-wing creator or writer, content creator, and then a great takedown of the right by a left wing writer, content creator. But of course, they're just completely blind to the insanity of their own side. I mean, just completely. And one of the things I'm finding increasingly interesting is I don't feel like what I'm encountering is conscious partisanship. In other words, I don't think what I'm encountering is people who kind of know the insanity of their side, but they're on a team and they're trying to, they're batting for their team, and they are putting out the best possible version of their team. And sure, there's insanity on their side, but that's not really for them to talk about. I genuinely think a lot of people increasingly don't see the insanity on their own side. Like, they don't see it at all. They're completely blind to it on both the left and the right. One of the big things I'm seeing all the time is each side, the right and the left, really bigging up, really concentrating on some of the worst elements of the other side and really inflating them to massive society-ending proportions, right? So, I don't know, the left will be going like, look, Trump's trying to shut down television stations. This is the end of American democracy. Maybe this is the end of Western democracy. Oh my God, this is the end of the world. You will see them saying, again, left people on the left saying, you just see in Britain, you see the Tommy Robinson March in London. Oh my God, this is a signal we're entering a totalitarian age in Britain, that hundreds of thousands of people could turn out in London and for this cause, and oh my God. Yeah, these same people, if you turned around and asked them about things like thinking biological sex is assigned at birth, for instance, they'll just shrug and say, well, look, some people take things too far. I'll admit that, but their heart's in the right place. And are you saying that people with gender dysphoria shouldn't have the right to live a peaceful life? I mean, et cetera, et cetera. When you bring up with the left-wing people, people of their politics openly celebrating the assassination of Charlie Kirk, for instance. Or people saying genuinely anti-Semitic things on pro-Palestinian marches. That's something I see all the time in London. And I'm not trying to paint everybody who goes on a pro-Palestine march as anti-Semitic. I want to be clear about that, just since we're in this realm of trying to delineate what's good and bad from everybody. There's lots of people who really care about the subject. I could go into this this would require a whole other video, but what I'm saying is there are genuinely anti-Semitic people, like people who are like, kill the Jews on some of these things. And I find it really odd that can just be sort of like shrugged away. The left will say, if Nazis show up at your rally, that proves that everybody there is a Nazi, which is nonsense. But okay, those are the rules they want to play by. Then by their rules, all the pro-Palestinian marches I've witnessed in London, and I've witnessed quite a few, just as a bystander and a journalist, then they're all Nazi rallies, because I've seen plenty of Holocaust denial, open Jew hatred at them. But again, you question people on the left and they'll say, oh, well, there's a few bad apples. You're going to judge the whole of the left by the few bad apples that are out there? You can't judge the whole. That's just a bit overzealous, isn't it? Then, but flip it around. The right will talk about how immigration, they're so worked up about immigration right now. And I'm not saying that, we've reached a point, right, where the asylum system's broken. It's really odd in Britain. It doesn't really function in a way that's good. I think when you look at the asylum hotels, I don't really think that anyone who's rational thinks they're a good idea or they're the right way to be doing this. Obviously, I think if you're trying to be as centrist as possible at this, we're trying to say, okay, look, people who are fleeing genuine persecution around the world, we want to have some sort of system where we can accommodate that. But ultimately, it can't be we just chuck thousands of people into hotels in Swansea or Rotherham or whatever. And there's just complete hostility between the people there, a lot of whom will be economic migrants, frankly, and the locals who are poor and struggling. That's a recipe for disaster, as we are seeing again and again. But the right will just take all this and blow it up into a society-ending proportions, where it's like, we're being taken over. White people will be a minority in Britain. Which, total nonsense. Britain is 86, 87% white. It's really the amount of immigration it would take for that to shift dramatically would have to be massive. I mean, way beyond what we've seen so far. And so they'll talk about that as this is the thing. They'll take what the left are doing, which and again, I've just had a whole rant about how insane some bits of left wing political culture is. But the right will blow it up into these are people running our institutions, and we're at a point of no return where everybody's going to be forced to be castrated or whatever. There is a hysteria about this throughout loads of portions of the right, and yet there is an inability for a lot of the right to be able to look critically at some of the worst elements of the right. And there are. I mean, you got the anti-vax stuff, you got all that WEF bullshit, which is just weird. You've got the whole, right down to open white nationalism and adoration of Adolf Hitler. And look, I want to be clear here. I am not doing the thing that the left does often, which is saying, well, because you got these guys, you got the Hitler lovers, that just means we have to write the whole of the right off. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is it would be nice for the right to at least acknowledge that stuff's crazy, that stuff's crap. We are putting a distance between us and them. And that does happen, but I don't think it happens enough. In the same way, I don't think it happens enough on the left. So much of politics would be so much better if both the right and the left just distance themselves from the really insane stuff. The decapitate turf stuff on the left, and the maybe Hitler was a good guy stuff on the right. Like, I just feel like we could come to a meaningful discussion in which that stuff was just left on the side, and we called that out across the board, and we all said that stuff's insane. It's come to the point whenever I see something politically sensible from anyone at all, it almost makes me weep. I actually feel genuinely emotional when I see something that's really sensible from across the right or the left. So, great example is American gay influencer Jeffree Star. These past couple of weeks, putting his neck on the line about saying that people who are celebrating the death of Charlie, the murder of Charlie Kirk, are horrible people, and that's all sick and demented. I mean, God, good for him. Amazing. Just great to see. Or Fraser Nelson, former editor of The Spectator, he's now a Times journalist, saying, look, daring to say, immigration, if handled well, has its upsides. And also daring to say, you know what, London is a great city, and all this stuff about it turning into Islamabad or whatever, it's just horseshit. And it's just some weird on-light right meme that's spun out of control. And again, I kind of feel emotional when I hear this kind of stuff, because it's just like, oh yeah, someone breaking ranks, someone willing to just try and call out what's happening, and try and put everything into perspective, and try and say, look, I may be on the right or I may be on the left or whatever, but sorry, this is nuts. We just need so much more of that, because, again, coming back to my theme, curated non-reality. The reason that there's so much anger at the moment, the reason there's so much bile, right, out there, the reason that the culture war is so increasingly heated and insane is because we're living in more and more enclosed off bubbles. The right and the left are now becoming separate realities across the West. And to the point that everybody can become so embedded in those bubbles that they try and, when they look at the other side, all they see is the insanity, and they just see the whole thing as insane. The left just look at the right, and it's like, it's all these aging men, and they're angry, and they're sexist, and they are racist, and they want to drink beer and pee everywhere, and they're all just these hooligans, and oh God, it's awful. And that's what the left is saying. And what the right are saying is, these are all these insane culture warriors who are trying to just take DEI as far as possible and basically enforce homosexuality or whatever it is, on whatever they're thinking this week on the entire populace. And again, like I say, a lot of the left stuff is insane. I'm not denying that. The whole biological sex isn't real stuff, that's mental. I think self ID is crazy. Just this idea that, like, me, okay, bearded bloke in his 50s, that I could go on a lesbian website, okay? And if anyone gave me a hard time for being there, I wouldn't have to change my name. I'd just be like, I am Nick, I'm a lesbian. And if someone came after me, then they would be the bad guy. That's nuts, guys. That's insane, right? So I'm not saying the right don't have a point. I'm not saying the left don't have a point about the crazy bits of the right. You see what I'm saying? I'm saying each side has its total mental stuff. And that mental stuff is being able to go just build and build and build and build, because no one on the left wants to call out the crazy stuff on the left, and no one on the right wants to call out the crazy stuff on the right. Right? Everybody feels like, no, we're in this culture war with the other side. Even when someone does something nuts or it's crazy or whatever it is, we've got to at least try and kind of back it up. We have to stay strong, right? We can't throw the nutters on our side to the dogs, because, you know, we're in a life or death with the other side, and that's just bullshit. And that's what I'm doing right now with this video, which I feel is going to do me no favors. It's probably, you know, well, if you've got this far into it, brilliant. But I feel like it's not going to do me any favors, algorithm-wise. It's not going to be something that everyone's going to watch. It might well do really badly, because the video I'm making right now is not the thing that the algorithm currently responds to or rewards. What the algorithm on YouTube, or actually any social media outlet, or any media outlet of any kind, rewards are the messages that play into division, that play to the one side, that say, hey, we're all lefties, we're right, we're on the right side of history, and I'm going to tell you why, and I'm going to intellectualize that so that you have some arguments to take to your right-wing family members or whatever. Yeah, you know, we're on the right wing, and the left wing have lost their minds, and they want to create this sexless, godless, meaningless society, and the only ones who are standing up for meaning or truth are people on the right. And I'm going to intellectualize that for you so that you have things to say to your left wing, younger family members, whatever. And again, these bubbles of non-reality are curated us to make us feel like, ultimately, the whole thing is about making us look at the threats to Western society as being people on the right or the left, depending on what axis we fall upon, and thinking that, like, immigrants or TERFs or whoever the hell it is are like the ultimate enemy, and they are the ones who are making everything go south, and why the world's a crappier place, when actually the world's a crappier place, and the reason that there's so much division is actually mostly down to, I mean, let's be frank about this, okay? The Russians and the Chinese, who are the ones pumping out this division and this crap through across social media. It's a thing that you're not supposed to really talk about, but it's just really obvious. And by the way, I'm not saying that they are totally to blame, because if there weren't those fault lines in that division to stir up, then whatever they tried wouldn't work, ultimately. But it works because we let them do it, and we are happy to do it. And if someone gets out of line and wants to talk about it, the Russians and the Chinese are very, like, happy to pay up, from what I understand. And so everybody keeps quiet about it, and everybody's still like, well, the immigrants and the TERFs and the whoever, and the DEI people and the football hooligans, they're to blame for everything that's happening in society, when actually we're all those people are just sort of elements of what Western society is at any given time. And what's warped is that we have communication channels that have been able to be exploited by our enemies. It's really that simple. And that's a difficult thing to say, because as soon as you say that, like, again, we're into during the Brexit discussion. So after the EU referendum in Britain, there was a lot of discussion. So the Remain side tried to push, there were portions of the Remain side that tried to say the Russians manipulated things so that we'd vote leave. That was it. The problem with that is that was way too simple an idea, right? The Russians were probably involved in some, they were probably pushing out stuff, but they weren't really, they didn't, I don't think, in a way, I don't think actually the Russians cared whatsoever about Remain leave. Maybe they probably slightly prefer to leave vote because it would sow more division. But that's it, really. What the point was at the time, in terms of Russian and Chinese involvement in social media in particular, which has only grown since 2016, over the last 10 years, is they want to sow division because they want Western society to blow apart. That's what they're interested in. That's what they care about. That's what the curated non-reality is about, right? Creating two sides that essentially go to civil war with one another to destroy Western society. Because what Western society is ultimately about, what liberal democracy is ultimately about, is you may think that, I think this. You may believe in this God, I don't. You may believe in this, and I wholeheartedly disagree with you. But we can live together. We can live together in society, and we can peacefully disagree. That's the whole idea. That's what liberal democracy essentially is. And when that breaks down, what you get inevitably is totalitarianism, because what you get is people who are like, this side are evil, and we cannot live with their evil. And the other side thinks the same thing. And then you're into it. And that can be anything. That could be, the split could be racial, it can be ideological. In fact, most of the time it isn't racial. Most of the time it is ideological. Even if it looks on the surface to be racial, or whatever else, it's usually ideological. And the point of liberal democracy is that when I look at someone, whether I believe in their ideas or not, I believe that they believe in them, and that I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt and think that they can argue for them in a cogent manner. Yeah? And that they will give me the same respect. And when we lose that, right, then it's over. It is. Western society is essentially over. And I think there's lots of people, particularly on the right, I will now criticize the right more, particularly on this point, is they think that the end of Western society has something to do with Christianity, or it has something to do with immigrants, or it has... I think those are all minor things. Very, at best, minor things, compared to we are losing the ability to peacefully argue with one another. That's why the Charlie Kirk thing hit me so badly, actually, now that I think about it. And why people celebrating it was so important to me is because we're getting to a place where we cannot peacefully agree. And actually, when someone gets shot in the neck, okay, and dies in front of a crowd, in front of their wife and children, and we can't just go, you know what, whatever he thought, whatever his belief system, that's horrible. When we lose the ability to do that, we lose the ability to live in a liberal democracy. That's really, that's it. So anyway, there was some other stuff I wanted to talk about here, but I think I've made my point, and I'd like to keep this brief and to the point. Curated non-reality. That's the biggest danger to Western society, in my opinion. And that's what we're going down that road. Because everything that's out there, right? YouTube, Twitter, whatever platform, right? Doing what I'm doing here and talking about what I'm talking about here it's not just not incentivized, it's massively disincentivized. Yeah? Trying to say there are some bad things on all sides, and actually maybe we should just think instead about hating the other side of the political divide in the West less than we do, and think more about, thinking about what the Russians and the Chinese are trying to do to the information that we get. That's the algorithm's really set up to crush that. So I'll be interested to see how I do with this. But even if it does badly, it's something I need to get off my chest and I needed to say, and I'm glad that I have. Thank you for joining me. My name's Nick Tyrone. I'm the neoliberal centrist dad, as always. If you've got this far into the video, I presume you've got something out of it. So I would really appreciate it if you would like the video, if you would subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, leave a rude comment. I don't really mind. Every comment helps. I will see you next time. How I always sign these things off is, I will see you next time that I have something to say that I think can cover a 20-minute plus video. And I don't know when that will be. I mean, maybe it'll be tomorrow, maybe it'll be in a fortnight. But either way, I will be back with you at some point. Thank you for listening. Love you guys. See you soon.